What happens when America's most violent biker gang turns on their own? The Hells Angels Sonoma County thought they were untouchable until their own brutality destroyed them. We're talking about 4.5 hours of torture, cold-blooded murder, and crimes so shocking that even the FBI called them the most violent of the dozens convicted. Today we're diving into how this feared criminal empire fell apart from the inside, leading to life sentences that ended their reign of terror forever. You won't believe what these criminals did to each other. The organization and structure of a criminal empire. To understand how the Hells Angels Sonoma County became such a powerful and dangerous criminal organization, we need to first examine how they were structured and organized. This wasn't a loose collection of motorcycle enthusiasts who occasionally broke the law or got into bar fights. This was a sophisticated criminal enterprise with a clear hierarchy, strict rules that were enforced through violence, and a systematic approach to intimidation and criminal activity that allowed them to operate for decades without serious interference from law enforcement. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, also known as Hells Angels or HAMC, is a globally recognized outlaw motorcycle gang with chapters operating across multiple continents. They are considered one of the 14 dominant outlaw motorcycle gangs in the United States, a designation that reflects both their size and their capacity for systematic criminal activity. The Hells Angels are part of the infamous 1% clubs, a name that comes from their belief that they represent the 1% of bikers who, as they put it, don't follow the rules, don't follow laws, and don't answer to anybody. This 1% designation isn't just a casual nickname or marketing slogan. It represents a fundamental philosophy that places the organization above the law and outside the bounds of civilized society. Members are expected to reject mainstream values, to view law enforcement as enemies to be destroyed, and to use violence whenever necessary to protect the organization's interests and maintain their reputation for brutality throughout the criminal underworld. The organization is structured into chapters known as charters, which operate regionally under the broader Hells Angels umbrella. In the United States, these charters are divided into West Coast and East Coast regions, creating a network that spans the entire country and allows for coordination of criminal activities across thousands of miles. While each charter retains a level of autonomy by establishing its own set of rules and adapting to local criminal opportunities, they must still abide by the collective guidelines known as the Hells Angels World Rules. These world rules aren't suggestions or guidelines that members can choose to follow or ignore based on their personal preferences or circumstances. They are enforced through systematic violence, and breaking them can result in severe punishment up to and including death. The world rules create a unified criminal organization that can coordinate activities across multiple states and regions while maintaining the local flexibility necessary to adapt to different criminal opportunities and varying levels of law enforcement pressure. Becoming a member of a Hells Angels charter is not a quick or easy process that someone can complete on a whim. It typically involves a carefully structured progression from being a hangaround to prospect for at least a year before attaining the status of a full-patch member. Each stage of this progression involves increasingly serious criminal activities and repeated demonstrations of loyalty to the organization, ensuring that only the most committed and violent individuals join the ranks of full members. The hangaround stage is essentially a probationary period where individuals spend time with the club and prove their worthiness to become prospects. During this time, they're expected to show their commitment to the criminal lifestyle and their willingness to put the organization's interests above their own personal safety, legal concerns, or family relationships. Hangarounds have no official status within the organization and can be dismissed at any time without explanation or appeal. Prospects face much more serious requirements and must prove their loyalty through criminal activities that often include violence against rival gang members, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, witness intimidation, and other serious crimes that carry lengthy prison sentences. The prospect period is designed to test an individual's commitment to the criminal enterprise and their willingness to risk imprisonment or death for the organization. Only after successfully completing this dangerous apprenticeship can someone become a full-patch member with the right to wear the organization's colors and participate in its decision-making processes. Full-patch members are distinguished by the iconic three-piece patch on their vests, featuring the club's name Hell's Angels at the top rocker. The center patch displays the Death Head logo, a skull with its mouth stitched shut, which has become one of the most recognizable symbols of organized crime in the world. Below the Death Head is the bottom rocker, indicating the state or region the member is from. Only full patch members are allowed to wear anything that displays the Hell's Angels name or the Death Head logo, and protecting these symbols is considered a sacred duty that justifies any level of violence. Members can also earn additional tags that they wear on the front of their vest, with the most notorious being the Filthy Few tag. Members earn this designation by committing acts of violence in support of the club, including violence towards rival outlaw motorcycle gangs, members deemed to have disrespected fellow Hell's Angels, those kicked out of the club in bad standing, and anyone who disrespects the patch in public. The Filthy Few patch serves as both a badge of honor within the organization and a warning to outsiders about that person's capacity for extreme violence. Each charter adheres to a standardized leadership structure that provides clear chains of command and responsibility, while ensuring that criminal activities can be coordinated effectively. This structure typically consists of roles such as president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and sergeant-at-arms. The president serves as the head of the charter and makes the final decisions on major criminal activities, while also serving as the primary representative to other charters and the national organization. The sergeant-at-arms acts as the enforcer, responsible for using violence when necessary to maintain respect for the charter and discipline charter members who fail to follow both charter-specific and world rules. Chapters hold mandatory weekly meetings referred to as church, where members discuss charter business and vote on charter issues ranging from criminal activities to internal discipline matters. These meetings operate on a one-man, one-vote principle, with most decisions made within the chapter being determined collectively through democratic processes. However, this democratic facade masks the reality that the most violent and influential members typically control the agenda and outcomes of these votes. Prospects are not allowed to participate in church meetings, demonstrating their lower status within the organization's rigid hierarchy. Instead, they are expected to provide security during these meetings, particularly by keeping an eye out for rival outlaw motorcycle gangs and law enforcement surveillance. This arrangement serves multiple purposes. It keeps sensitive criminal discussions away from newer members who might not be completely trustworthy, while also providing free security for the organization's leadership during their most vulnerable moments. During church meetings, it was very common for all Hell's Angels Sonoma County members to share information about each other's criminal cases and potential criminal liabilities. The progress of members' criminal cases was closely monitored by the organization's leadership, who used this information to coordinate witness intimidation, plan retaliation against law enforcement, and ensure that members remained loyal even when facing serious criminal charges that could result in lengthy prison sentences. Key players in the criminal enterprise. Understanding the complete downfall of the Hell's Angels, Sonoma County requires a detailed examination of the key individuals who built, led, and ultimately destroyed this violent criminal organization. These weren't just motorcycle enthusiasts who occasionally broke the law or got into fights at local bars. They were sophisticated criminals who built their reputations on systematic violence, calculated intimidation, and the ruthless exploitation of others. Their personalities, relationships, and criminal activities shaped the organization's culture and ultimately determined its fate. At the absolute center of the entire criminal enterprise stood Raymond Folks, known to everyone in the organization as Ray. Raymond held the most important leadership positions within the Hell's Angels Sonoma County, serving with distinction as both former president and former sergeant-at-arms. His influence extended far beyond any official title or position, making him the most respected, feared, and powerful figure in the organization's entire history. Raymond was president of the Hell's Angels Sonoma County, at least until 2008, when he went to prison on federal charges, but his incarceration did nothing to diminish his power or influence within the organization. Even from behind bars, Raymond continued to call the shots and maintain significant influence within the chapter, demonstrating the organization's ability to continue criminal operations even when key leaders were imprisoned. Despite his incarceration, Raymond received moral and financial support from Hell's Angels Sonoma County during his imprisonment, showing the organization's commitment to maintaining loyalty even when members were behind bars. Raymond's motorcycle was still proudly displayed at the clubhouse during his incarceration, like a shrine to his authority, and he continued to actively participate in club activities by joining meetings from prison through smuggled cell phones and other communications methods. Raymond had built a reputation for being a badass, a rock star, and Mr. Hell's Angel among members throughout the organization and beyond. One member emphasized that nobody controlled Raymond, explaining that he had the highest level of respect and was highly admired throughout the criminal network. He was regarded as somebody extremely powerful within the club, even during his time behind bars, demonstrating that respect in the organization was based on capacity for violence and criminal achievement, rather than current freedom or legal status. The extent of Raymond's power and influence was captured perfectly in one member's statement. Whatever Ray needed, Ray got. And if that's because he was a member of Sonoma County or just a Hell's Angel in general, that's Ray, and Ray gets what he wants. This wasn't just about personal charisma or individual relationships, but about Raymond's proven willingness to use extreme violence to achieve his goals and his track record of success in building the organization's power and reputation throughout the criminal underworld. Notably, Raymond's presence elevated the status of Hell's Angels Sonoma County significantly because he was known and respected among other Hell's Angels chapters throughout the country. His reputation gave the local chapter access to criminal opportunities, protection, and resources that they wouldn't have had otherwise, making him invaluable to the organization's continued success and expansion into new criminal markets. Russell Ott, known throughout the organization by the moniker Chief, represented the organizational memory and founding vision of the criminal enterprise. As a founding member of Hell's Angels Sonoma County and its president for 15 years before Raymond Folks took over, Russell had been present for the organization's entire transformation from a simple motorcycle club into a sophisticated criminal organization capable of coordinating complex illegal activities across multiple states and regions. Russell was described as one of the most active Hell's Angels ever, often spending extensive periods of time at the Hell's Angels Sonoma County Clubhouse and even living there during certain periods when the organization faced external threats or needed constant coordination of criminal activities. This constant presence made him a central figure in the organization's day-to-day operations and criminal planning. While his deep knowledge of the organization's history, rules, and relationships made him an invaluable resource for newer members and a key figure in maintaining the organization's criminal traditions and institutional memory. Christopher Ranieri, a former president of the Boston Hells Angels chapter, maintained extraordinarily strong ties with both the Hells Angels Sonoma County and Fresno chapters, creating a criminal network that spanned the entire continent and allowed for coordination of complex criminal activities across thousands of miles. His influence and connections were demonstrated by the celebrations that were held for Christopher when he visited both West Coast clubhouses, showing the respect and fear he commanded throughout the organization. The depth of Christopher's connection to the West Coast chapters was revealed through his personal relationships with their members and his emotional investment in their success. The Hells Angels Sonoma County Sergeant-at-Arms, Russell Lyles, visited Christopher frequently and even considered naming his son after him, showing how personal relationships and criminal business interests intersected within the organization. Christopher wore a Sonoma tag and had a Sonoma County Death's Head tattoo on his forearm, demonstrating his deep emotional and criminal investment in the West Coast operations. These personal connections weren't just about friendship or mutual respect between individuals who happened to share similar interests. They were the foundation of criminal conspiracies that would span thousands of miles and involve coordination between different criminal organizations, ultimately bringing federal law enforcement into the picture and dramatically increasing the potential penalties for everyone involved in the criminal enterprise. Jonathan Nelson, the most recent president of Hells Angels Sonoma County, was highly respected throughout the organization, but his respect was based on fear rather than admiration or genuine leadership qualities. He often used violence to address perceived slights against himself and the Hells Angels Sonoma County, creating a climate of terror that extended far beyond the organization to affect the broader community and innocent civilians who had no connection to criminal activities. Jonathan had developed significant respect and a close personal friendship with Christopher Ranieri, giving him access to the East Coast criminal network and elevating his status within the broader Hells Angels organization. This relationship was crucial to Jonathan's authority within the organization because it demonstrated his connections to powerful figures in the national criminal network and his ability to coordinate activities across multiple states and regions. Jonathan's leadership style was characterized by extreme sensitivity about his status and authority within the organization. He couldn't tolerate any challenge to his position, whether real or perceived, and he was quick to respond with extreme violence to any perceived disrespect or challenge to his authority. This volatile and dangerous personality made him both an effective enforcer of the organization's criminal activities and a liability who attracted unwanted law enforcement attention through his excessive and poorly controlled use of violence. Brian Wendt, former president of the Hells Angels Fresno chapter and the Hells Angels West Coast Sergeant-at-Arms, was known throughout the criminal network for using extreme violence in carrying out his role as regional enforcer and coordinator of criminal activities. Brian had developed a close personal bond with Jonathan Nelson that created a powerful partnership between the Sonoma County and Fresno chapters, facilitating major criminal enterprises including drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and ultimately murder. Brian was present at the Hells Angels Sonoma County Clubhouse frequently, demonstrating how the organization's leadership moved freely between different chapters to coordinate their criminal activities and maintain unified control over their territory and criminal operations. His role as West Coast Sergeant-at-Arms made him one of the most feared and powerful enforcers in the entire organization, responsible for maintaining discipline and coordinating violent activities throughout the western United States. Joel Silva was a member of Hells Angels Sonoma County, who had built a reputation as a bully, causing serious problems at the Sonoma County, Fresno, and New Hampshire clubhouses through his inability to control his violent impulses and respect the organization's hierarchy. Joel's behavior was creating tensions not just within his own chapter, but throughout the broader Hells Angels network, threatening the carefully maintained relationships that were crucial for the organization's criminal success. The culture of violence and systematic intimidation. The Hells Angels Sonoma County didn't simply use violence as one tool among many for achieving their criminal goals and maintaining their position in the underworld. They built their entire organizational identity and operational philosophy around the systematic, calculated use of violence and intimidation. This culture of brutality wasn't an accident, a side effect of their criminal activities, or something that developed gradually over time. It was a deliberately cultivated and carefully maintained system that served multiple crucial purposes within their criminal enterprise and defined their reputation throughout the criminal underworld. Violence within the organization served as the ultimate form of communication and problem-solving, transcending language barriers and cultural differences within their diverse membership, while ensuring that everyone understood the consequences of crossing the organization or challenging its authority. When words failed, when negotiations broke down, or when the organization's authority was challenged by internal dissent or external threats, violence provided a clear, immediate, and universally understood solution that left no room for misinterpretation or future challenges to the organization's power structure. This wasn't random brutality, uncontrolled aggression, or violence committed in the heat of passion by individuals who had lost their tempers. It was calculated violence designed to send specific messages to specific audiences while achieving concrete criminal objectives and maintaining the organization's reputation for absolute ruthlessness. Internal violence was used to maintain strict discipline and ensure that all members understood the severe consequences of disloyalty, disobedience, or any challenge to the organization's hierarchy and authority structure. The organization's commitment to violence was so complete and fundamental that it became the primary measure of a member's worth, status, and potential for advancement within the criminal enterprise. Members who were willing to commit acts of violence in support of the club could earn the prestigious Filthy Few tag, which served simultaneously as a badge of honor within the organization and a clear warning to outsiders about that person's capacity for brutal, unrestrained violence against anyone who crossed them. This system created powerful incentives for members to actively seek out opportunities for violence, knowing that their willingness to hurt, maim, or kill others would be rewarded with higher status, greater respect from their criminal associates, better criminal opportunities, and increased protection from the organization. The Filthy Few designation wasn't just about recognizing past violence, but about demonstrating ongoing commitment to using brutality whenever the organization demanded it, regardless of the personal risks or legal consequences. Rival outlaw motorcycle gangs were viewed as natural enemies by Hells Angels members, not competitors in the same criminal markets or even adversaries in a traditional sense, but as threats to be systematically eliminated through coordinated campaigns of violence and intimidation. Members were expected to attack enemies on sight whenever they encountered them, regardless of the circumstances, location, or potential witnesses who might observe the violence. Government witness Joseph Hardesty revealed during his testimony that he was recruited by the Hells Angels for what they called big game hunting and small game hunting, terminology that revealed how completely the organization had dehumanized their enemies and reduced fellow human beings to prey to be systematically hunted and eliminated. This referred to the task of hunting and killing the Mongols, which they considered big game, and hunting and killing the Vagos, which they considered small game. This hunting metaphor wasn't just casual language or dark humor used by criminals to describe their activities, but reflected a fundamental worldview that divided humanity into predators and prey, with the Hells Angels viewing themselves as apex predators, with the natural right and responsibility to eliminate anyone who challenged their dominance in the criminal ecosystem. Joseph recounted a chilling incident that demonstrated how completely the organization had normalized extreme violence and conditioned its members to commit potentially lethal acts without hesitation or moral consideration. He was riding with Hells Angels Sonoma County members, including Joel Silva and Russell Ott, when he spotted an individual whom he believed to be a member of a rival outlaw motorcycle gang, based solely on appearance and location. Without any attempt to verify the person's identity, determine their intentions, or consider the potential legal consequences of his actions, Joseph immediately took out his gun and fired multiple shots in the person's direction, potentially committing attempted murder based solely on the belief that the target was associated with a rival organization. This hair-trigger response to perceived enemies showed how the organization had conditioned its members to view lethal violence not as a last resort to be used only when absolutely necessary, but as the appropriate first response to any potential threat or challenge. Following the shooting, rather than being concerned about this random act of potentially lethal violence or worried about the legal consequences of attempted murder in a public location, the other Hells Angels Sonoma County members present commended Joseph's actions and praised him for his willingness to use violence, hailing him as a real Hells Angel. This response revealed how completely the organization's value system had been inverted from mainstream society, where violence against perceived enemies wasn't just acceptable, but was actively celebrated and used as a primary measure of a member's worth and commitment to the criminal enterprise. After a Mongols member killed the president of the San Francisco Hells Angels, in what the organization viewed as an unacceptable challenge to their authority and dominance, Hells Angels Sonoma County members were instructed to actively look out for Mongols throughout their territory and attack them on sight whenever they were encountered, regardless of the circumstances or potential consequences. This directive wasn't just a general call for increased vigilance or a suggestion that members should be prepared to defend themselves if attacked, but a systematic campaign of violence designed to terrorize an entire rival organization through coordinated attacks. Failure to comply with this directive resulted in immediate and severe loss of status within the Hells Angels organization, demonstrating how seriously the leadership took their campaign of systematic violence against rival groups. For example, a full-patch Hells Angels Sonoma County member failed to report seeing a Mongol license plate within what the organization considered to be Hells Angels territory, and was immediately demoted to prospect status as punishment for this failure to participate in the organization's violent activities. This harsh punishment for what might seem like a relatively minor oversight demonstrated how seriously the organization took their campaign of violence and how any failure to actively participate in violent activities against rival groups was considered a fundamental betrayal of the organization's core values and mission. The brutal assault of Troy Conte.
Troy Conte, a former member of Hell's Angels Sonoma County, was sleeping with Raymond Folks' girlfriend. In November 2016, after Raymond found out about the affair, Troy received a text message stating that all Hell's Angels Sonoma County members needed to be at the clubhouse for a meeting. Members of the club were already there, and 20 minutes after Troy got there, Raymond arrived and confronted him about the affair. Raymond struck Troy in the face. Despite attempts to leave, Troy was dragged back inside by Raymond and Russell out, and the assault continued. Eventually, the assault stopped for a bit so that Hell's Angels Sonoma County members could vote on Troy's membership within the club. After they voted to revoke his membership, the beating continued. Troy endured a brutal beating that involved being hit with a baseball bat, being bullwhipped and pistol whipped over the course of 4.5 hours. Troy was also held down so Raymond could run a tattoo gun across his face. Raymond left amidst the assault and came back later. Troy said that the worst part of the assault was when Jonathan Nelson pistol whipped him in the face. The night Troy was brutally assaulted and removed from Hell's Angels Sonoma County, Raymond left amidst the assault in order to sexually assault Troy's wife Michelle in a disturbing act of intimidation. Amid the violence at the clubhouse, Raymond called Michelle and told her to come to the clubhouse. Once she arrived, Raymond took her to a secluded area. He told her if she doesn't do what he says, Troy is going to get worse than what he already has, and if she says anything to anybody, then he'll come after her. Raymond then forced Michelle to perform fellatio on him before she returned home. Following this, Raymond returned to the clubhouse to continue the assault on Troy, callously recounting what he did to Michelle. Prior to Troy's return home, Raymond went to their house and attempted to assault Michelle again in their bed. However, Hell's Angels Sonoma County member, Josh Johnson, who was bringing Troy home after the assault at the clubhouse, arrived at the house before Raymond could follow through with the sexual assault and persuaded Raymond to leave. Michelle then rushed her injured husband to the hospital. After the brutal assault, Troy required an overnight stay in the hospital due to the severity of his injuries. Medical records described Troy as a risk for sudden clinical deterioration and life-threatening injuries. Medical records showed that he suffered facial fractures, including those affecting the orbital walls of his left eye. He also needed plastic surgery to remove the tattoos from his forehead after Raymond ran a tattoo gun over his face. Even to this day, Troy still has vision issues stemming from the incident. The day following the assault, Michelle disclosed to her husband that she had been sexually assaulted by Raymond. Despite usually avoiding dealing with law enforcement, Troy encouraged Michelle to report the assault to the police, a typically forbidden thing to do by a member or associate of the Hell's Angels. Michelle followed through with Troy's advice, leading to Raymond's subsequent arrest.
The savage, hours-long assault of Troy Conte represented the Hell's Angels Sonoma County's culture of systematic violence at its most personal, calculated, and brutal. This wasn't just another act of criminal violence, a spontaneous fight between individuals with personal grievances, or even a typical example of gang brutality. This was a carefully orchestrated torture session designed to punish what the organization considered the ultimate betrayal, while simultaneously demonstrating their absolute power over anyone who dared to cross them or challenge their authority. The 4.5-hour ordeal that Troy endured would become one of the most compelling and horrifying pieces of evidence in the federal prosecution that would ultimately destroy the entire criminal organization, providing prosecutors with detailed testimony about the organization's methods, leadership structure, and complete willingness to use extreme torture to maintain control and discipline among their members and associates. Troy Conte, a former member of Hell's Angels Sonoma County who had once been trusted with the organization's secrets and included in their criminal activities, was discovered to be sleeping with Raymond Folks' girlfriend. In the violent and rigidly hierarchical world of the Hell's Angels, this wasn't just a personal matter between individuals or a private relationship issue that could be resolved through discussion, negotiation, or mutual agreement between the parties involved. The affair represented a direct challenge to Raymond's authority, status, and reputation within the organization, an insult that demanded not just punishment, but a brutal public demonstration of power that would serve as a clear warning to anyone else who might consider crossing the organization's leadership or challenging the established hierarchy. The discovery of this betrayal set in motion a series of events that would reveal the cold, calculated nature of the organization's approach to internal discipline and their sophisticated understanding of psychological torture techniques. In November 2016, after Raymond discovered the affair and had sufficient time to plan his response and coordinate with other members of the organization's leadership, Troy received what appeared to be a routine text message that gave no indication of the horror that awaited him. The message stated that all Hells Angels Sonoma County members needed to be at the clubhouse for a mandatory meeting, the kind of gathering that happened regularly for organizational business and criminal planning purposes. For Troy, who apparently had no idea that his affair had been discovered or that he was walking into a carefully planned trap designed to destroy him, this seemed like just another routine gathering of the organization's membership. He had no way of knowing that this seemingly innocuous message was actually his death warrant, summoning him to face judgment and punishment for his betrayal in front of the entire organization. When Troy arrived at the clubhouse, he walked directly into a carefully orchestrated and meticulously planned trap that had been designed to maximize his suffering while demonstrating the organization's power to other members. Other members of the club were already gathered and waiting, fully aware of what was about to happen and eager to witness what they knew would be a violent demonstration of the organization's capacity for brutality and the severe consequences of crossing their leadership. Members of the club were already there, and 20 minutes after Troy arrived, giving him just enough time to realize that something was seriously wrong and to experience the growing fear and anxiety that would enhance his psychological suffering, Raymond arrived and immediately confronted him about the affair. There was no discussion, no opportunity for explanation, apology, or negotiation of any kind. Without any warning or preamble, Raymond struck Troy in the face with tremendous force, beginning what would become one of the most savage and prolonged displays of organized violence in the organization's brutal history. Despite desperate attempts to leave the clubhouse and escape the violence that was clearly planned for him, Troy was dragged back inside by Raymond and Russell Ott, demonstrating that this wasn't just Raymond's personal revenge, but a coordinated organizational effort supported by other leaders of the criminal enterprise. The participation of multiple senior members in preventing Troy's escape showed that this torture session had the official sanction and active support of the organization's leadership. Eventually, the ongoing physical assault was temporarily suspended so that Hells Angels Sonoma County members could hold a formal vote on Troy's membership within the club, creating a grotesque parody of democratic decision-making that overlaid the systematic torture and added an additional layer of psychological trauma to the physical violence. This wasn't just about inflicting physical pain and injury on Troy, but about maximizing his psychological suffering through a carefully orchestrated process of humiliation and degradation. After they voted to revoke his membership, permanently expelling him from the organization and stripping him of any protection or consideration he might have expected from his former associates, the beating continued with renewed intensity and systematic brutality. Troy endured a brutal beating that involved being hit with a baseball bat, being bull-whipped with various implements, and being pistol-whipped by multiple members over the course of 4.5 hours of continuous violence. Troy was also held down so Raymond could run a tattoo gun across his face, permanently marking him as a traitor and ensuring that he would carry the physical scars of this experience for the rest of his life. This act of forced tattooing revealed the psychological sophistication of the organization's torture methods, which were designed to inflict not just immediate physical pain, but lasting humiliation, trauma, and permanent disfigurement that would serve as a constant reminder of what happened to people who crossed the organization. During the assault, Raymond left amidst the torture and came back later, a detail that would prove crucial to understanding the full scope of the organization's campaign of violence and intimidation against Troy and his family. Troy said that the worst part of the assault was when Jonathan Nelson, the organization's current president, pistol-whipped him in the face, demonstrating how the organization's highest-ranking leader felt the need to participate directly and personally in the violence. After the brutal assault, Troy required an overnight stay in the hospital due to the severity of his injuries, with medical records describing him as a risk for sudden clinical deterioration and life-threatening injuries. Medical records showed that he suffered facial fractures, including those affecting the orbital walls of his left eye, and he needed plastic surgery to remove the tattoos from his forehead after Raymond ran a tattoo gun over his face. Even to this day, Troy still has vision issues stemming from the incident, showing the permanent damage caused by the organization's systematic torture. The sexual assault and intimidation of Michelle.
Even to this day, Troy still has vision issues stemming from the incident. The day following the assault, Michelle disclosed to her husband that she had been sexually assaulted by Raymond. Despite usually avoiding dealing with law enforcement, Troy encouraged Michelle to report the assault to the police, a typically forbidden thing to do by a member or associate of the Hells Angels. Michelle followed through with Troy's advice, leading to Raymond's subsequent arrest.
While Troy Conte endured systematic torture and brutalization at the clubhouse, his wife Michelle became the victim of a calculated sexual assault that demonstrated the Hells Angels Sonoma County's willingness to target completely innocent family members as part of their comprehensive campaign of violence and intimidation. This aspect of the organization's criminal activities revealed their understanding that psychological warfare could be just as effective as physical violence in destroying their enemies and maintaining control over anyone who might challenge their authority. The night Troy was brutally assaulted and removed from Hells Angels Sonoma County, Raymond left amidst the assault in order to sexually assault Troy's wife Michelle in a disturbing act of intimidation that was designed to maximize Troy's psychological suffering while demonstrating the organization's complete power over anyone who crossed them. This wasn't a spontaneous act of sexual violence or an opportunistic crime committed in the heat of the moment, but a calculated and strategic decision designed to inflict maximum psychological damage on the organization's primary target. Amid the ongoing violence at the clubhouse, with multiple members participating in Troy's systematic torture, Raymond made the deliberate decision to temporarily abandon the physical assault and focus his attention on Troy's wife. He called Michelle and told her to come to the clubhouse, using her natural concern for her husband's safety as a weapon that could be turned against both of them. Michelle, having no way of knowing what Raymond intended to do to her and probably being primarily concerned about Troy's safety and well-being after receiving such an ominous summons, felt compelled to respond to this demand from such a powerful and feared figure within the organization. Her decision to comply with Raymond's order showed how the organization exploited people's love and concern for family members as tools that could be used to facilitate additional crimes. Once she arrived at the clubhouse, Raymond took her to a secluded area away from the ongoing assault, showing his careful planning and understanding that what he was about to do needed to be conducted away from potential witnesses who might later testify about his specific actions. This level of premeditation and tactical thinking demonstrates that the sexual assault wasn't an impulsive act, driven by opportunity or sexual desire, but a deliberate crime designed to achieve specific objectives within the organization's broader campaign of intimidation and punishment. Raymond told Michelle that if she didn't do what he said, Troy was going to get worse than what he already had, and if she said anything to anybody about what happened, then he would come after her personally. These threats created a psychologically devastating situation where Michelle had no good options available to her and was forced to choose between terrible alternatives that would result in suffering regardless of her decision. She could either submit to Raymond's sexual demands, knowing that compliance would spare Troy additional suffering, but would subject her to sexual assault and ongoing trauma, or she could resist and fight back, knowing that her defiance would likely result in even more brutal treatment for her husband, who was already being systematically tortured by multiple attackers in the next room. Raymond then forced Michelle to perform fellatio on him before she returned home, committing a sexual assault that served multiple purposes within the organization's criminal strategy and demonstrated his complete contempt for both his victims and basic human decency. The assault was designed not just to satisfy Raymond's personal sexual desires, but to demonstrate his complete power over Troy and his family, showing that he could take anything he wanted from them, including his wife's dignity and bodily autonomy. The sexual nature of the assault added an additional layer of humiliation, trauma, and psychological damage that would affect both Michelle and Troy for the rest of their lives, creating lasting emotional scars that would persist long after the physical wounds had healed. Raymond understood that sexual assault carries a particular stigma and creates specific forms of trauma that would make it even more difficult for the victims to report the crime or discuss it with others, potentially keeping his actions hidden while maximizing the long-term psychological damage to both targets. Following this sexual assault, Raymond returned to the clubhouse to continue the assault on Troy, callously recounting what he had done to Michelle in front of the other members who were participating in or witnessing the ongoing torture session. This wasn't just bragging about a criminal act or sharing details of his sexual conquest with his criminal associates, but a calculated demonstration to the other members of the organization that Raymond had the power, authority, and complete lack of moral restraints necessary to commit any crime he wanted against their enemies. Prior to Troy's return home from the hospital, Raymond went to their house and attempted to assault Michelle again in their bed, showing his belief that he could commit any crime he wanted against Troy's family without facing any consequences from law enforcement or retaliation from his victims. However, Hells Angels Sonoma County member Josh Johnson, who was bringing Troy home after the assault at the clubhouse, arrived at the house before Raymond could follow through with the second sexual assault and persuaded Raymond to leave. The day following the assault, Michelle disclosed to her husband that she had been sexually assaulted by Raymond, adding another devastating layer of trauma to an already horrific situation and ensuring that Troy would have to live with the knowledge that his personal betrayal had resulted in his wife being victimized by the same man who had tortured him. Despite usually avoiding any contact with law enforcement, which was typically a forbidden thing to do for any member or associate of the Hells Angels, Troy encouraged Michelle to report the assault to the police. Michelle followed through with Troy's advice, leading to Raymond's subsequent arrest and marking the beginning of the organization's downfall as their code of silence was finally broken. The murder of Joel Silva and its execution.
Joel Silva held the position of sergeant-at-arms in the club and had been a member for 5 years when he met his tragic end. During June 2014, Joel attended the annual Laconia Motorcycle Week in New Hampshire alongside fellow members Joseph Hardesty, as well as charter members Brian Wendt, Robbie Huff, and Tio Bueno from the Fresno chapter. While at the event, Joel and Joseph spent time at the Laconia Charter Clubhouse, where they were reckless and causing problems. Joseph stated that they were using meth, tearing the clubhouse apart, terrorizing the prospects, and picking on all the East Coast members. Joel engaged in this type of behavior very often, which was causing tensions between him and the Hells Angels. At one point, a conflict arose between Joel and Boston Charter member Sweeney, who was the right-hand man to Boston Charter President Christopher Rainieri. Sweeney was upset with Joel for moving marijuana across the country, while Joel was upset and jealous that Sweeney had taken a Hells Angels chain from him and given it to Joseph.
The calculated, cold-blooded murder of Joel Silva represented the ultimate expression of the Hells Angels Sonoma County's willingness to eliminate anyone they viewed as a threat to their criminal enterprise, even when that threat came from within their own ranks and involved killing someone they had once considered a brother. This wasn't a crime of passion, a spontaneous act of violence during a heated argument, or the result of a personal dispute between individual members with long-standing grievances. Joel Silva held the position of sergeant-at-arms in the club and had been a member for 5 years when he met his tragic end, a length of service that should have earned him respect and protection from his criminal associates. As someone responsible for internal discipline and enforcement within the organization, Joel was expected to be one of the most trusted and valued figures within the chapter's hierarchy and power structure. However, over the course of his membership, Joel had developed a reputation as an out-of-control bully whose violent behavior was creating serious problems not just within his own chapter, but throughout the broader Hells Angels network, and threatening the organization's carefully maintained relationships with allied criminal groups. Joel was known for his reputation as a bully, causing problems at the Sonoma County, Fresno, and New Hampshire clubhouses through his inability to control his violent impulses or respect the organization's established hierarchy and rules. During June 2014, Joel attended the annual Laconia Motorcycle Week in New Hampshire alongside fellow members Joseph Hardesty, as well as charter members Brian Wendt, Robbie Huff, and Tio Bueno from the allied Fresno chapter. What should have been an opportunity to strengthen relationships with East Coast chapters and conduct productive criminal business instead became a complete disaster that would ultimately mark Joel for death and set in motion the events that would lead to his murder. While at the event, Joel and Joseph spent considerable time at the Laconia Charter Clubhouse, where their behavior was so reckless and disruptive that it shocked even other members of the notoriously violent organization and created serious tensions with their East Coast allies. Joseph later testified that they were using methamphetamine extensively, which contributed to their complete loss of control and inappropriate behavior throughout the event. They spent their time tearing the clubhouse apart, terrorizing the prospects who were supposed to be protected and guided by full members, and picking on all the East Coast members who were their hosts and should have been treated with respect and courtesy. Joel engaged in this type of behavior very often, which was causing ongoing tensions between him and the broader Hells Angels organization and threatening the stability of the entire criminal network. At one point during the Laconia event, a serious conflict arose between Joel and Boston Charter member Sweeney, who served as the right-hand man to Boston Charter President Christopher Ranieri, and was therefore one of the most powerful and influential figures in the entire East Coast criminal network. This confrontation involved both business and personal elements that revealed the complex dynamics within the criminal organization and showed how individual grievances could escalate into existential threats to the entire network. Sweeney was upset with Joel for moving marijuana across the country without proper authorization from the appropriate leadership, a serious violation of the organization's territorial rules and chain of command that could have attracted federal law enforcement attention and interfered with other members' established drug trafficking operations. Meanwhile, Joel was angry and jealous that Sweeney had taken a Hells Angels chain from him and given it to Joseph, an action that Joel viewed as a personal insult and direct challenge to his status within the organization. The situation escalated dramatically when Joel directly threatened Sweeney and openly stated that he wanted to kill him, actively seeking help from Joseph and Robbie in carrying out this murder. This threat was recognized immediately as a significant problem that could destroy the entire organization through internal warfare. Joseph tried to talk Joel out of this catastrophic course of action, telling him directly that you can't kill other Hells Angels, and pointing out that he was talking about killing a member over a chain, just because your feelings are hurt. When the news of Joel's threat eventually reached Brian Wendt, he was very upset and immediately told Christopher about the situation, setting in motion the chain of events that would lead to Joel's death. The Fresno Charter gave Joseph an ultimatum, telling him that he would have to choose between supporting Joel or aligning himself with the more powerful Fresno Charter. You're going to stay here with Joel, or you're coming with us. Pick a side. Joseph ultimately opted to align himself with the Fresno Charter, recognizing that they were more powerful and that staying with Joel would likely result in his own death. As Joseph later explained, if I stayed with Joel, that meant I was going to face the same fate as him. He also believed that Joel had made a big mistake, and it wasn't the safe choice to stay with him, showing how members constantly calculated their survival based on shifting power dynamics within the organization. Subsequently, Joseph went with the Fresno Charter to Christopher's home in Boston, where Christopher and Brian had a private discussion regarding Joel's threat and the appropriate response to this challenge to their authority. Upon rejoining the group after their confidential meeting, Christopher and Brian announced their decision with chilling simplicity. Joel had to go. This wasn't an emotional decision made in the heat of anger, but a calculated business decision made by the organization's most powerful leaders after careful consideration of the threat Joel represented. The following day, at Joseph's home in Antioch, California, a formal planning meeting took place among Hells Angels Sonoma County, President Jonathan, Brian, and several members of the Fresno Charter to discuss the specifics of killing Joel and coordinate the logistics of the murder. After thorough discussion, they ultimately decided to proceed with the plan to eliminate Joel permanently. Their reasoning revealed the cold, businesslike approach the organization took to internal violence and the elimination of problematic members. They decided to kill Joel because he was causing too much problems, beating too many friends up. The threat to Sweeney's life, he was causing too much drama within different charters. This wasn't about justice, honor, or protecting innocent people, but about eliminating a disruptive employee who was interfering with the smooth operation of their criminal business. Jonathan also had personal motivations for supporting Joel's murder that revealed additional layers of the organization's internal politics and power struggles. Jonathan perceived that Joel was challenging his status as Hells Angels Sonoma County president, dating back to a confrontation in February 2013 when Joel had struck Jonathan in the forehead. an act of disrespect that Jonathan had never forgotten or forgiven. Jonathan was extremely sensitive about his status as president and couldn't tolerate any challenge to his authority or position within the organization. In the summer of 2014, Jonathan had complained that he had problems with Joel, specifically that he didn't like the way Joel was bad-mouthing him, and that Joel went back east and said some stuff about him about being president. These perceived slights had been festering for months, and the Laconia incident provided the perfect justification for eliminating someone Jonathan viewed as a personal threat to his leadership. The investigation, trials, and ultimate justice. The sophisticated murder of Joel Silva, combined with the brutal assault of Troy Conte and the sexual assault of Michelle, provided federal law enforcement with the evidence they needed to launch one of the most comprehensive and successful organized crime investigations in recent history. The investigation that followed demonstrated how modern law enforcement techniques, when combined with the courage of victims and witnesses, could penetrate even the most secretive criminal organizations and hold their leaders accountable for decades of violence and intimidation. The investigation began with the extraordinary courage of Troy Conte and his wife Michelle, who made the critical and dangerous decision to report their brutal victimization to law enforcement. Despite knowing full well the obvious and potentially lethal danger this cooperation posed to their safety and the safety of their family members. Troy's decision to seek medical treatment for his severe injuries and Michelle's decision to report her sexual assault provided investigators with their first real window into the organization's criminal activities and systematic methods of operation. These initial reports weren't just isolated incidents of violence that could be dismissed as personal disputes or random criminal activity unconnected to organized crime. They revealed a clear pattern of systematic criminal behavior that extended throughout the organization's membership and across multiple states, suggesting the existence of a sophisticated criminal enterprise rather than just a motorcycle club that occasionally engaged in illegal activities or individual members who committed crimes independently. The development of confidential informants proved absolutely crucial to the investigation's ultimate success, as these insider witnesses could provide detailed information about the organization's structure, ongoing criminal activities, and specific crimes that would have been impossible to obtain through traditional law enforcement techniques alone. Steve Verhagen, a former prospect who had witnessed many of the organization's crimes and participated in their violent culture, made the courageous decision to cooperate with federal authorities and provide detailed testimony about what he had seen and experienced during his time with the organization. Even more significant was Joseph Hardisty's decision to become a government witness, a choice that required extraordinary courage given his direct involvement in planning Joel Silva's murder and his detailed knowledge of the organization's most serious crimes. Joseph's testimony would prove crucial in establishing the interstate nature of the criminal conspiracy, the involvement of multiple chapter leaders in ordering and coordinating the murder, and the sophisticated methods the organization used to plan and cover up their most serious crimes. The investigation also benefited tremendously from advances in digital forensics and communications analysis that allowed investigators to track the movements and communications of key suspects during critical periods of criminal activity. Cell phone records proved absolutely crucial in establishing the timeline of Joel Silva's murder, the movements of the people involved in planning and carrying out his death, and the coordination between different chapters that made the crime possible. Cell phone data from July 16, 2014, the day after Joel's disappearance, showed that Fresno charter member Merle Hefferman got in touch with Levi Phipps, the manager of California Crematory, linked to Yost and Webb Funeral Home in Fresno. Merle texted Levi, "You better be there," a communication that would prove to be crucial evidence of the organization's use of legitimate businesses to support their criminal activities and dispose of evidence. After receiving the message, two men arrived at the crematorium, and they brandished a gun at Levi, forcing him to participate in the disposal of Joel's body. They moved what appeared to be a body from their vehicle to the crematory incinerator, and then arranged for another body to be cremated to provide cover for their criminal activities. Cell site data also placed key suspects near the location where Joel's burnt-out truck was discovered on fire in a remote area, creating a digital trail that corroborated witness testimony about the murder and cover-up. On June 22, 2022, after hearing extensive testimony about the organization's structure, criminal activities, and specific violent crimes, a federal jury found Jonathan Nelson, Russell Ott, and Brian Wendt guilty of conspiracy under RICO, as well as conspiracy to commit murder under the violent crimes in aid of racketeering activity and murder under VICAR. In addition to these primary charges, Jonathan Nelson received additional convictions for assault with a dangerous weapon to aid racketeering and use of a firearm during a crime of violence, reflecting his direct participation in the brutal torture of Troy Conte. All three defendants were ultimately sentenced to life in prison, representing the maximum penalty available under federal law and effectively ensuring that they would spend the remainder of their lives in federal custody, unable to direct or participate in any future criminal activities or rebuild the criminal network they had spent decades constructing and maintaining. On May 17, 2023, a second federal jury rendered guilty verdicts against Raymond Folks and Christopher Ranieri, two of the most powerful figures in the broader Hells Angels criminal network, whose convictions demonstrated that the federal investigation had successfully reached beyond the local Sonoma County chapter to target the regional and national leadership of the criminal organization. Raymond Folks faced additional convictions for assault with a dangerous weapon in support of racketeering, relating to his leading role in the systematic torture of Troy Conte, and witness tampering, reflecting his sexual assault of Michelle Conte and his calculated attempts to intimidate her into not cooperating with law enforcement. Christopher Ranieri was found guilty of conspiring to commit murder as per the violent crimes in aid of racketeering activity, establishing his role in authorizing and directing the murder of Joel Silva from his position as Boston chapter president. At the time of this account, both Raymond Folks and Christopher Ranieri were still awaiting their sentences, but the statutory maximum penalties they faced reflected the severity of their convictions. Christopher Ranieri faced a statutory maximum prison term of life, while Raymond Folks faced a statutory maximum prison term of 60 years, sentences that would effectively mean life imprisonment for both men given their ages and the nature of their crimes. Several other organization members chose to cooperate with prosecutors rather than face trial and potential life sentences. Merle Hefferman pleaded guilty for his part in the violent crimes as part of the racketeering conspiracy and was sentenced to 48 months in prison on October 19, 2023. Russell Lyles pleaded guilty to involvement in a racketeering conspiracy and assault and was sentenced to 63 months in federal prison. Damian Cesena pleaded guilty for his part in the violent murder and was sentenced to 52 months in prison.